It's Zelda, Tears of the Kingdom. I haven't got it yet, obviously, because I don't have my Switch 2 yet. But Unky, you've been playing it?
Just a tad. Been playing this game just a little bit. It's the only game I've been playing essentially this week, and for very good reason. It's essentially something shiny, the game, because I find myself not being able to focus on one main thing at all in this game, because every time you turn a corner, there's something new to go after, and I can't stop myself. I have to chase the next thing. So I'll go out and say straight away, if you didn't like Breath of the Wild, you're probably not going to like this game, because about the only gripe you can probably have is it's very similar to that. It is using the same Hyrule, essentially, and it's been rejigged a few things here and there. So if you didn't like Breath of the Wild, this is probably not going to change your mind. Maybe there's a few extra mechanics there that maybe will, but that's the only caveat. But I love Breath of the Wild, one of my favourite games of all time. So happy to be back in the world. It's like coming home to an old friend or family's house and just like enjoying being there. And what they've done in this world now is just, I think, an absolute feat that they got this thing working on a Switch. It's at least twice the size of Breath of the Wild in terms of landmass and stuff you can actually do in this game. It has this whole new building and crafting mechanic, which we alluded to in the standoff, that games just aren't doing in this genre in terms of big open world action games like this. And to have them work on a Switch and keep them simple, and it could be one of those mechanics that anyone looks at and goes, I don't want building or crafting in my game, but Zelda nails it, gets away with it. It does it brilliantly. It doesn't get in your way. In fact, it enhances all the puzzles and stuff you're doing. It gives you a freedom to do these puzzles however you like. The amount of times I have gone into a shrine, yep, it brings back your shrines, but I think the shrines in this are done a lot better than the other game. They're a bit more organic in the way you got to solve them. And when I say solve them, you can solve these things the way the developer has not even thought that that's how you're supposed to solve them. And the amount of times I've done that and cracked myself up laughing with how I've actually solved some of these things using the physics and using the new building and fuse mechanics, it's just incredible. Like, there's no way I was supposed to do one of these shrines the way I did it. And when I did it, I started laughing to myself. That was absolutely ridiculous what I just did. And the fact that I could do that, and it's essentially cheating the game, because so many of the mechanics just allow you to do stuff within its world and within the systems it gives you. It's just incredible.
Can you detail that solution for us? Like, what did you do exactly that broke it?
Yeah. So I had to there's a shrine, we had to move like these giant metal balls from like one side to another. And the first bit was easy. I could just chuck it on a rung and let it slide down. But then the next one, the rung kind of was separated. I had to transfer this giant ball, and the stuff it gave me, it looked like I had to build like a sort of a platform for it to slide down. But all I did was end up grabbing the ball, fusing it to two poles. Then the pole sort of had a gap in it. So then I wedged that around the pole. And the ball was sort of stuck up in the side, and then the pole sort of came over the top of another pole. So it sort of just made its way and somehow got to the other side.
Yeah, that sounds pretty crazy.
It was just fun. There's just moments like that throughout this whole game that you just like, I just can't believe I did that. Or you forget you've got the ascend ability, which is another ability to be able to actually get you up through ceilings and stuff. And I'm like, oh my God, how can I get up there? I've used my only like fuse ability on this spring that you can put on your shield and then do the shield surf to bounce you up. I use that. How the hell am I going to get up there? I'm like, oh my God. I was there for 5 minutes. I can just ascend straight to the top and take 2 seconds.
So what's ascend? Is it like a grapple hook or?
No, it's just literally an ability that, like, if you've got a ceiling above you and then you can get above it, you just hit the send. It gives you a little green little icon. You go through it, and then you just hit A to come out the other end. So any ceiling,
teleporting, kind of.
Essentially, yeah. If you're in a cave and you need to go back up to the top of Hyrule, you can just hit this ascend. You'll go through the ground and hit the top of Hyrule. And you just come back out.
Oh wow! Okay.
It's actually sort of backtracking through caves and all that kind of stuff. So it just allows you to sort of traverse the world a lot easier and more like. It is just easier. It makes the game more fun, and there's less backtracking. So especially when you're deep inside a cave that you've found, and you're hunting down some new gear and all that, you finally find it. I don't want to go back all the way through. You just straight up in the roof, out you go, back on your adventure to the next bit of gear. So it's the creativity in this game. I can see why it took so long to come out, and the fact that game runs as well as it does, I think I've found far less issues with frame rate and stuff than I did with Breath of the Wild the first time. You still get your occasional stutters here and there, but the game, for what it's doing on a Switch, which is old hardware at this point, is just incredible. It's running pretty much a solid 30 frames per second all the time. I'm not getting too many dips when it gets really crazy, because you can do some crazy stuff now, like your arrows and stuff now aren't fire arrows, ice arrows. You fuse anything in the world to that arrow to create whatever you want. So say you find fire flowers, you attach those as you're drawing your bow, it creates a fire bow. You attach the white juju jelly, it becomes an ice bow. You can attach a bomb, it becomes a bomb arrow. So the amount of different things you attach, like horns of the enemies you've killed, so they're not just currency now or whatever. Their abilities to be able to either put the horn on a sword to increase its durability or create extra damage for your arrows. So the amount of stuff you can do in this game, it just says, just go, have fun, use the systems, use the mechanics, and it's not holding your hand at all. Just like Breath of the Wild, you've got points of interest to go to, which will drive the story forward. But there's nothing saying you have to go here. There's no quest markers like you. In other games, you might say, okay, I know my gear's in this cave over here because it's telling me to go there on a side quest. This is just, I can see some rocks there. Cool, I need to get in there. So I'll fuse a giant boulder to my sword. It might shrink down the boulder to sort of be sword size, but then you need that to get inside that cave. And then you find yourself on a little mini mission inside this cave and hunting enemies and finding treasure. And then at the end of it, you might find a new piece of gear. And you've done that yourself out of pure curiosity and adventure as opposed to being told to go there. And I think that's why this game is so fun. It's like being on an adventure like that you dreamed of back in the day when you played Zelda Ocarina of Time, that our mind filled in the blanks, but now we're doing it for real. And it's just every little thing in this game for me is just like being on that adventure and unlocking new creative things and just seeing the beautiful world that they've created, albeit being on a Switch. But again, we get new hardware. I can only imagine what they're going to do with Zelda next, because this is way, way, way bigger than any Switch game I've ever played. It's bigger than pretty much any other game. Probably even bigger than Elden Ring in size, maybe. And Elden Ring is big. Elden Ring does have, its underground area as well. But yep, I'm going to mention it. It's minor spoilers for Zelda, but you've now got obviously the Sky Islands or the Skylands, and then you've now got the under Hyrule part as well, which is like sort of this essentially the same size as Hyrule, but underneath, which is harder. It's darker. You need arrows and bright gloom, I think it's called, flowers to shoot to create the light.
Does it feel outdoorsy the way the basement in Elden Ring does, or does it feel like you're under the earth in a cave?
No, it does feel like you're in a cave because it literally is dark and you have to light it up down there. And that's right. Part of you see the things you get to that create more light down there, but on your way there, you've got to use your sort of light arrows and these light things you get to create the light down there and get it expands. But down there is where all the good loot is. So if you go down there, you're going to be fighting higher level stuff. You are fighting high level enemies and everything, but the reward that you get from that risk is great. You do lose your heart, so you can lose hearts permanently down there. When I say permanently, until you go back up or find one of the shrine things down there, but you can die very quickly down there, so you've got to be very careful and go in very well prepared. But
so is that late game, do you think? Do you think maybe first?
Yeah, I mean, they do chuck you down there pretty early in the side quest to go unlock some of the ability, or one of the abilities you can get, which I haven't unlocked that ability. You get the camera ability down there, which is another thing. It's like playing Pokemon Snap in your Zelda now, going out, taking photos of animals and enemies and filling up your compendium and stuff like that. So it's just got all these extra gameplay mechanics now. It's like with the sky in the middle, Hyrule. It's like a Zelda hamburger. You've got the nice meaty patty in the middle. You've got the islands at the top with their sesame seeds on the bun, and then you've got the dark undertones of the bottom of the bun where all the juice is seeped into, and that's the scary part. So I just really like this Zelda hamburger they've created with this world. And I mean, I could keep waxing on about this game, is pretty much the whole show, really. I don't talk about anything else. But I know Bully will have some things. Only one more thing I want to say before Bully jumps in. I'll probably have more to say after that. But just some of the creative stuff I've made. I don't know if Bully's come across this, but just chucking a mine cart on a shield, and, you can shield surf in Breath of the Wild. Attaching a minecart to a shield now becomes a skateboard. So you can pretty much skate yourself around Hyrule. It's now, you've got a Tony Hawk game. Talk about blending genres.
That's epic.
It's just this, and you can put a rocket on your shield, and then all of a sudden, if you use your shield, you go flying up in the air as a rocket, and then you can glide down, and so you can use that to solve puzzles. Bully, not sure if you've tried this, but the ascend ability, the rewind ability, or recall ability. Have you used that to create lifts yet?
Well, I have in some of the. Well, I don't want to go too far into it, but in some of the shrines I've done, you had to use it, the rewind to rewind platforms back up to access different areas, I guess. So,
gotcha.
Yes, to a degree, but in terms of stuff, because I know you touched on it, but as you're sort of going around the ground level of Hyrule, you'll see things fall from the sky. So I can imagine that if you go and find those, use rewind, it'll then lift you back up into the sky level as well.
Yeah, that's exactly what it does. But I've been using, this is the way you can cheat a lot of the shrines as well. Like the rewind ability, what you do is anything that's flat surface, anything you can stand on, all you do is you move it up with your Ultrahand ability to where you want to go, leave it there for a bit, drop it back down slowly, stand on it, and then just hit recall, and it'll just take you up. So it's a good little ability you can use to cheat a lot of the things, because I want you to try and do all this other mechanics and stuff, but you can just essentially create lifts for yourself, or you can get across gaps doing the exact same thing. Like, I had a massive gap I had to get across, and I just created a whole bunch of logs in a row, and that still didn't make it. So all I did was sort of move it out, move it back, stand on the end of it, hit recall, bring it over. It takes me all the way over. So it's just the creative stuff like that people are just going to think of in this game, and you can do just out of just think it, you can do it. Like, you're Bob the Builder, just like, it's probably fitting that Troy looks like Bob the Builder tonight, because Link is our new Bob the Builder. You can think it, you can do it, and I just love it. So, Bully, those are my initial impressions. For me, I know you got maybe a few little gripes. I don't have too many other than my first 5 hours. I think after that initial bit, I was like, it's a bit more Breath of the Wild. And I'm like, yeah, it's good, but it feels like Breath of the Wild. But then it's sort of, once all that gameplay stuff blends and it all comes together, I think it's definitely makes Breath of the Wild feel like that was a warm up to what this game was. And for me, without him finishing it, for me, this is what a 10 out of 10 game is and should be doing, and pushing the sort of envelope and pushing games forward, because I think that's exactly what this game does.
Sorry, mate, how many hours in are you at this point?
I'd be just a touch under 20, I reckon. And I've only just finished my first temple. So,
yeah, taking your time, enjoying it.
Taking my time, enjoying it.
That's epic, man. And Bully, your thoughts? How far into you? Oh, I should mention first, sorry, this is your Let's Play footage we're watching now. Obviously, you're on screen twice.
Yeah, well, it's, again, probably too much for some people. But anyway, here we are. Look, in terms of the... I'll go the opposite way, and to Unky, and I'll start with some of my negatives in terms of the game. And now, this doesn't... I'm with Unky as well. I think this is a 10 out of 10 game every day of the week. But there's a couple of things that are mildly annoying or frustrating, and one in particular, which is really of Nintendo's own doing, in my opinion. So they came out a couple of weeks or a month or so before release, and for those that have played Breath of the Wild, there's no traditional Zelda dungeons as such, as we really know them. So you don't go into a dungeon. You have to, find some keys to get through doors. Generally, you'll find a weapon in there. That weapon then will get you further into the dungeon. And as a general rule, you would use that weapon against the boss of the dungeon itself. So Breath of the Wild never had any of that. It had the Divine Beasts, obviously. So, for anyone that hasn't played it, we don't really need to go into it too much. And so that was one of the criticisms of Breath of the Wild. But when, in the lead up to the release here, they actually said, oh, well, no, it does have traditional Zelda-style dungeons in it. And I thought, oh, fantastic. If we can combine what Breath of the Wild was with some of those more classic aspects, which I really enjoy out of Zelda, that's, they're my favourite parts, is puzzle solving those dungeons and working your way through. And essentially, it's an RPG in terms of Zelda as a whole in a series. It's an RPG of types, but realistically, there's only two ways, in essence, to improve your character, and that is one, by getting the hearts or the heart containers that you find, and two is by getting the weapons, because that's or the equipment in the dungeons. And I guess, leading into it, thinking that there was going to be some proper dungeons there, I thought that, this is fantastic. This is going to elevate it to another level. I suppose that's my one big criticism of it, is that the dungeons that we were led to believe going into it, in my opinion, Unky might be a bit different, but in my opinion, they were very similar to what we saw in the Divine Beasts in Breath of the Wild, which isn't a bad thing in and of itself. I thought they were enjoyable, they were fun. They just weren't that traditional Zelda style. So again, I think it's just that they've probably set themselves up for failure, and that's of their own doing, because, as I said, that they've said, no, this is what's here. It hasn't eventuated in the manner that I think most of us are sort of thinking of. So in terms of gripes, that's probably really my only little gripe in how it's played out. And really, if they had said nothing, no one would have been any the wiser, and we just would have carried on. So in terms of the game itself, I'm with Unky. It's one of those games that I'd hate to have, and this isn't making fun, so don't hopefully no one takes it that way, but I'd hate to have ADHD or something like that playing this game, because you will set off in the distance and say, this is where I need to go. And it's, there's a shiny, like it's exactly what Unky said. There's a shiny thing over there. No, I've completely forgotten why I was going over here. And then you end up tracking halfway across the map because you find one thing, and then while you're standing on the top of a mountain or a hill, you go, oh, what's that over there? And then you go over to the next thing, and then over to the next thing, and over to the next thing. And all of a sudden you've traversed half the map away from where you need to be or where you were going for the whatever quest or whatever you were looking for, and you end up just finding random things. And I think
that just sounds like high praise for the gameplay design.
Oh, it is, and it's one of those things. It just captivates you that and sometimes you might see something that you think's there, but by the time you get over there, it's nothing of any consequence or anything like that. But okay, well now I'm 5 minutes out of my way where I was going, and where I'm at is of no consequence. But now I can see something else that might be of consequence. So you go, oh, okay, well I'll go over there now, and I find the same thing. I think there's four sort of main dungeons as such, but then you've got all the shrines the same as they had in Breath of the Wild as well. So you get distracted with all that. So I've fully done one of the dungeons and sort of 3/4 of the way through the next one. And I'm about the same sort of time period into it, about 20, 25 hours thereabouts. And I certainly haven't been rushing through it. And it's almost, you've almost got to force yourself to go, oh, hang on, no, I'm not going to run around anywhere. I'm going to just focus on this one quest that I've got. And I'm going to go and do that quest. And it is exceptionally hard to do.
It is.
It is exceptionally hard to do. In terms of the gameplay itself, I think I said to Unky on the day of release, we were sort of chatting back and forth, and the abilities that you've got in this one, to me, seem more almost natural in the way that you can use them and interact with the world and then puzzle solve around it. I did enjoy the ones in Breath of the Wild, but they were a bit not difficult to.
I think it was they were a bit restrictive in Breath of the Wild. Like you always knew sort of what you had to do because the abilities you had were so set and what they actually were, as opposed to this, which is just free form. You can do whatever you want with the tools you've got.
Yeah, and I also found even with the ones in Breath of the Wild, it was. Yes, you knew what you had to do with him, but then by the same token, there was some that were actually, especially with the shrines and stuff, I found really difficult just to, you knew what you had to do, but you just struggled to do it. Like there was that, I can't remember the name of it, but that momentum one where you basically freeze an item, you whack it with your weapon or whatever it is a number of times, and it'll fly off into the distance. But what I found quite often with that is you'd always misjudge the distance you had to go, or your accuracy would be slightly off or whatever it was. And it was just minor little things like that. Whereas these abilities they've got are just completely tightened up. They're, as I said, very intuitive as to what you're doing. You don't sort of go into these shrines or the dungeons and sit there and go, what the hell am I doing? How do I do this? This is ridiculous. If you actually pay attention to it, you think of what abilities you've got, you scan and have a look around your environment, it becomes quite natural. Just as you progress through the game and become used to the gameplay and the mechanics, it becomes very natural in the puzzle-solving ability, which I think is...
I was going to say, that natural stuff is just what comes into it. It doesn't give you one way to do things. Like, you get multiple options in these shrines or dungeons, and it's up to you to figure out which one you want to do and then try it, and then that's where the fun lies, I think.
Yeah, and even with that, like, so Unky and I could sit side by side, go into the same shrine and say... all right, we've got to get to the end of the shrine, the exact same one, but just because of the way I've been playing it and how I've been using, some of the abilities like the Ultrahand, for instance, that's one of the big ones that you use a lot. But just the way I've been using it and constructing items and putting them together could be, that's just through trial and error and playing it out in the open world, could be completely different to the way that Unky's been. Utilising that and some of the thought processes that goes through his head. So we both go into the same shrine with the same materials, with the same things open to us to get to the end of the shrine, and you could watch us sit side by side. And as Unky said before, we solve that in two completely different ways. And it's not even, we've just melded two items together, sort of the same, but a little bit different. It is, you could have completely different things in the way you solve it. And as Unky said, I hadn't even thought of using the rewind to basically create platforms platforms and lifts for yourself. You know, that's something that I just hadn't thought of. Whereas, you know, I've probably been a bit more, how can I link these items together in such a way that they'll stay upright and won't drop on me, and I can get across gaps that way. So I've sort of used that sort of thought process to get through things as well. So I can't speak. I really can't speak highly enough in terms of the gameplay itself. There's only that one criticism from my point of view in respect to the dungeons, but you know, it's Breath of the Wild, but just polished. It's, you know, tightened everything up together. The you know, some people still have a gripe about the weapon breaking and the weapon degradation that you have. I really did in the first one for some reason, but in playing in this one, whether it's just going into it knowing that that's what's going to be the case, and then you can plan around that a bit better. So
I think it's the fact that you can pretty much turn any like even just a stick you can turn to a weapon now. You got a horn or someone like one of those enemies, you get heaps of them, like they're their horns or their like spiky bits, whatever. You can turn that weapon from nothing into a really good weapon, or even just something that's going to smash rocks. So nothing feels useless in this game. Like even as much as a tree branch can become very useful in this game. So I think it's just brilliant game design in terms of and the way they got around it. Instead of just being like, oh, we're going to make weapons that don't break. They've found a more creative way around it. And I think that it should be applauded for that.
Well, and even little things like you said, like I know it was frustrating in the Breath of the Wild sometimes when you go into a mine or you go to a rocky area and there was ore that you could smash to get various materials and stuff. But if you didn't have a particularly designed weapon just because you didn't have it in your inventory at the time, and you use one of your normal weapons, you would basically break the weapon trying to open these things. Whereas, as Unky said, if you go, okay, well, I don't have one of those, but if I have a look around this cave, I'll find a stick and I'll find a rock, and I can combine them together, and then that creates a mallet that one or two hits in this ore will crush it, and you're not destroying your weapon out of it. So just little things like that just make the gameplay a lot more fluid as you're going through it. I think really, as I said, tightens up the experience, makes it a lot more enjoyable, and even the weapon, the other weapons that you can use, like say you've got your bow and arrow again, but you can attach basically whatever item you pick up in the world that, you know, in Breath of the Wild, you might have used it for cooking or you might have used it for elixirs or whatever it is. You can attach it to the end of the bow or the end of the arrow, I should say, and fire it off. And depending on what you put on there, it has different effects. So you can put the keys eyes, which are the bats, onto the end of the arrow. It becomes a homing arrow. You can put bombs onto the end of the arrow and then shoot it off, and it has this massive explosion, which can take out groups of enemies at a time. You can attach fire things to it. You can attach ice things to it. You can attach, enemies' horns that you've picked up to create more damage and all this sort of stuff. So just even going through that, and the amount of items that you can pick up and just playing through it. And
there's no incumbency. How good is that? You pick up anything you want.
Yes, you can carry whatever you want. But it's because you've got so many things, you sometimes forget what you've got and what you've got available. And it's not until you find yourself in a pinch sometimes that you sort of start scrolling through your items and you go, I wonder if I could use this on the tip of the arrow. I wonder if I could attach this to my sword or my shield. And
you know what, Bully? The answer is always yes, and that is why this game is incredible.
Correct. So if you, I think we've said numerous times, if you can think of it, you can do it. There's, it's really only open to your imagination as to how you do it. And in some respects, it's almost that Lego type thing, like from when you're a kid. If you can think of something that you want to build, the blocks are there. You just need to put them together in the manner that's going to create your design or whatever it is. And it's exactly the same here. If you can think of it, then chances are you'll be able to do it, no matter how bizarre or absurd your idea is. The reality is you could probably do it in some way, shape, or form. And I can't speak highly enough. And it was funny, I was reading just before I'll throw it back, Unky, I was actually reading an article today and they were talking about the scores of games. So whether you agree with the list or not, but there's only 8 games in the last 40 years that have received a 10 from both IGN and a 40 from Famitsu, which is another game website. So 40 is their perfect score, 10 for IGN. So there's been Zelda Ocarina of Time, Metal Gear Solid 4, Zelda, the Skyward Sword, on the Wii. Now, I'll probably debate that one, but anyway, we'll move on. Soul Calibur, Grand Theft Auto 5, Metal Gear Solid 5, The Phantom Pain, Zelda Breath of the Wild, and Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. So, as I said, that's two different agencies have reviewed it. And it, even if you don't trust either of those for whatever reason, or you avoid those, you can pretty much go and read any review website or any gaming publication, YouTube, wherever you want to go. I don't think or I have seen anybody criticise this game more than just a couple of little gripes here and there. It's been across the board. It is, essentially being called the perfect video game, and I can see why. It's absolutely amazing. I know, Troy, you've said you're not going to get it until the Switch 2 comes out and you get the better frame rate or whatever it is, but I'll tell you right now, you are missing out, my friend, because this is probably one of the best games in the last, I'd go so far as to say the last 20 years.
Epic, man. It looks great. I'm loving what I'm hearing. I'm looking forward to going hands-on, but yeah, I'll wait. I will still wait. A couple of questions from my side, if I may. If I remember correctly, after what was the first one, Breath of the Wild, everyone said we're going to see climbing everywhere, and I'm pretty sure it didn't appear anywhere. I'm pretty sure it would have come back for this game, though.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely the same. You can pretty much climb anything, and that's, I think, the freedom this game gives you. I think you can look at games like Horizon Forbidden West that sort of added expanded climbing and the little parachutey thing as well to be like that. But no game is like this where it just lets you climb everything.
But have they changed it at all from 1 to 2? Like, has it undergone any improvements?
No, not really. Like, it's essentially, if you were doing Breath of the Wild, you're doing it here. Like, I can't see any, unless I put them side by side, I couldn't see anything too different. It's just more so you don't necessarily have to use climbing as much as you did in the last, because you got that ascend ability. Like, a lot of the times, if you can see a mountain, if you can get under it, you can essentially use that ascend ability to get up. So I find stamina not as big a deal in this game as, say, Breath of the Wild, but I think that lends itself to a more fun game, and you're not stuck, trying to climb a wet rock or a rock when it's raining for, hours and just trying to get up there. There's other means to do it. So I think they've just streamlined that, but it's still just as fun to climb everything. And I think
I was going to say that's probably one of the things I've noticed more is, and we were discussing it just before, Unky, but I don't think that the stamina is as harsh in this one as it was the first one. You don't seem to roll through it as quickly. And the other thing I've noticed, which you just touched on then, was no end of frustration in Breath of the Wild, is that you go in, especially when you're in certain areas of the map where you get a lot of rain, is that you would literally have to just sit there and
wait,
watch and wait, and you could be there for 5 or 10 minutes real time waiting for the rain to stop so you could actually climb something. Because for anyone that's played that game, if you start climbing a wet rock, you'll get a couple of feet up and you just start slipping down. You burn through your stamina and you'll never get up there. So there was a lot of dead time doing that. Whereas in this one, it does rain, but it sort of seems to be more of a passing shower and more of a weather effect and sort of giving you, drawing you into the world more than being a mechanic that is causing a hindrance.
So better wet weather gear in number 2.
Yeah, better.
Yeah,
well, you can create, like, I don't know, I had a moment where I just had a group of like orange leaves, and I just knew there was going to be a Korok seed, like, dude hanging under there, but it was raining, so I couldn't shoot a fire at it because it was just the rain would put the fire out. So I would just makeshift a little roof for it, and then my fire wasn't getting wet, so I could get the Korok seed. So just little things like that are just like what make this game so great.
Sorry, you've got an arrow with a flaming tip and a shield on top of the flaming tip?
No, so I found a board and I created like a little makeshift roof just to go over the leaves in the world. So it was like just a little house over the leaves. So I could just shoot my fire out the leaves so it wouldn't get put out. So
you were combining like a shield and an arrow, so the shield was.
Hey, that's a good idea. Stand by.
You probably can do it. Let me just check. I think the only thing, like, my only gripe probably for you, Troy, would be that some of it's got so much stuff you can do on this one controller that I find myself a lot of times, if I'm flustered or like just all of a sudden I'm surrounded by enemies, I find myself hitting the wrong buttons a lot because my fingers are trained to play an action game like this a certain way, and because you've got all these different mechanics on the controller, it does things a bit differently terms of some other games. So
does that hold true with the Pro controller, or are you specifically talking about the Joy-Cons there?
No, just any controller. Pro controller, because you've got so many things you can do, I find myself sometimes like hitting the D-pad when I should be holding L1 before I'm hitting the D-pad to go over. If I select it. So you find yourself, you really sometimes have to, if you're in the zone and you're thinking about what you have to do, it's fine. fine. But I find as soon as you're in like a bit of a hurry, you can easily just start chapping all the wrong shit. It just goes haywire pretty quick. So no, it's not so much a gripe of the game, is because it is giving you all those tools to do, and you've got to put them on a controller somewhere. So I think with what you've got to do in this game, they've done probably the best they can do. It's just one of those little things that, yeah, you might find a little bit of a learning curve at the start, especially in terms of building. But I think once you hit about that 10, sort of 12, 15 hour mark, it all sort of starts to click, and you're sort of not really, too confused about how the building mechanic works. So, 10 out of 10 for this game. It's a masterpiece. It's, what we expected, but was hoping was going to be delivered, and I think they've done it.
Nice work. A final point from me then before we move on is, if I hit a button here, I just wanted to suggest maybe, Bully, this for you. You were saying about, it can be hard to stay on point, run down what it is you're after. Can you see that there? Oh, that's not a very good bloody resolution of it.
Yeah, I can. I know what you're talking about, and I can see it. I did download a similar one for Breath of the Wild, and I started using it, but I
Sorry, if I could just explain to the viewers, because a lot of people might know what this is, man. So just give me 1 sec and I'll throw it back here. So basically, it uses the Google Maps API, and they throw in the game world, and then they add all these objects and make notes, and you can make your own notes. There's a bit of community stuff, but this is all on the Map Genie website. I absolutely love this Map Genie website. I use it for any open world game, assuming they've covered it. But if you have a look here, guys, if you zoom all the way out, I don't know if that camera's following too well.
Oh, Jesus.
So that's just the mid-level, but then I can zoom out further. Whoop, and this is speaking to your, the size or the scope of the game monkey. Like, you can see how massive it is there. But the other thing that this has got is a search function. So if you're after a certain item or a certain bag, or, you want the Master Sword or something, you just type it in the search and it'll show you exactly on the map where it needs to go. So just to shout out to anyone who hasn't heard of Map Genie, it's an absolutely fantastic tool. Over to you, Bully.
Oh, no, I was going to say, I did try it out, I think, with Breath of the Wild, and I said to Unky before we started tonight, I've really tried as best as I can to avoid videos, hints, websites, etc., that sort of give away tips and tricks, and there's been plenty of them along the journey, which is fantastic if that's your thing. But for me, a large part of the enjoyment I get out of the game is that being distracted and what's over there, and allow me to explore this. So I think I will jump into that at some point, but I think that'd be more end game sort of stuff for me. Once you've really explored as much of the world as you can find, and done everything that you want to do. And if it was just a matter of just mopping up some extra things, like if you're missing a couple of shrines, or I don't know what your thoughts are, Unky. I'm not sure I'm going to go after all those Korok seeds again, but or even little things like if you were missing pieces of equipment that you were wanting towards the end of the game, whatever it is, I think I'd jump into it then. But certainly the mystery and the mystique of having that exploration in and of itself, I think, is a large part of the draw to this game for me. And I know quite often I've spoken in the past about Breath of the Wild. Sorry, not Breath of the Wild. The Witcher 3, in terms of the world setting and how fantastic I think that is. But that still had its map markers of, there's something over here, or have a look at this, whereas this just completely takes it out. Yes, you have the occasional marker of a general area that you have to go to for a quest, but it doesn't always land exactly where you need to go, and it's just a general guide only. Whereas there's literally nothing else on the map. The only things that will end up on the map as you're playing it are things that you've put there yourself. So you've had to explore it, or see it in the distance, or use your binoculars, or whatever it is, to find what you were, to find something in the world that you can then market yourself, because you want to follow up down the, whether you're going to go and do it now, or you decide, no, I'm off doing this, I'll come back to that later. That is the only markings on the map that you have. So it's all self-initiated, really. And as I said, that to me just makes it that 10 out of 10 game. Whereas if it had the quest markers like your Ubisoft style game or something like that, it'd probably drag it down to an 8 or 9 for me. But just that experience, I think, is something that I think you should, in my opinion, go through in the first instance. And then certainly if down the track, or you get stuck or whatever it is, then, jump into a map map application, or have a look at some
Map-ini, yeah.
videos or whatever it is to get to where you need to go. But I would highly suggest just go into it as blind as you can, and just enjoy it for what it is.
Nice.
Yeah, and before we move on, I just want to shout out the story. I think the story in this one is a lot more focused, and there's more of it. I think there's a lot more stuff to do, and it's giving you a bit more context for what you're doing. I think the side characters and the way they sort of tell the story, I think, is a lot more cinematic, and it just gives you a bit more drive to do these things that you're doing in the world. So I'm not going to make any spoilers, but I just wanted to call out the story, especially from the very start of the game. It starts much differently to the way Breath of the Wild starts in terms of that very start. And then the way the sort of cutscenes play out and the way the story works, I think it's got a lot of good intrigue in there. And I really want to see what's happening with the story more so than I did in Breath of the Wild. So shout out to the story this time around.
All right, you've given me another question then. Without, if you can answer it without any spoilers, does this narrative take place immediately after Breath of the Wild, or is it like a parallel universe? So it's the same landmass, but the stories are totally unrelated? Or
no, I don't know if they give you a time frame. It can't be too long after Breath of the Wild. I wouldn't have thought. Some characters are growing a little bit older. You start the game with all your hearts and all your stamina, which newsflash, that's not going to stay that way for a long time. No, you're essentially the Link that you finished the last game with maybe a few years later. I would probably suggest the way the world sort of progressed, and one of the characters you meet, he's grown up a little bit older since the last time you've seen him. So there'd be a few years, I think, between two.
Yeah, okay, perfect. Oh, that was luck. Hey, that's something. Old Uncle Donkey. Gee, Donkey.